Welcome to the deep dive. We all manage things, right? A team, a project, maybe just our own day.
Absolutely. It's everywhere.
So today we're going to dig into different ways management actually works, how we take in information, how we process it, and then, well, what we do, or maybe what we decide not to do.
Right. Which is just as important sometimes. And we're using Chapter 14 of Professional Generalism for this. It gives a really helpful structure for thinking about these styles.
Okay, so let's unpack that. The chapter highlights three sort of key variables. First is sensing where and how you get your info, the scope and the mode.
Where you look and how you look.
And then second, what you focus on when you're processing that info.
We actually think about, yeah.
And third, the action, or maybe inaction options, what you can do or choose not to. So it seems like good management isn't just about knowing stuff.
No, not at all.
It's really about how you gather it, what you zero in on, and then, the choices you make based on all that.
That sums it up nicely. And the chapter really stresses how these are all linked. How you sense things kind of shapes the actions you even consider.
And the processing focus is like the bridge between them.
Exactly. It connects the sensing to the potential actions.
Gotcha. Now, they use a couple of terms we should probably define. Collection and unity.
Right. Collection is basically your area of interest. Could be anything, really.
Like a team.
Yeah, a team is a perfect example. And the unities would be the individual people on that team.
Okay. But it can be more abstract, too, right?
Oh, absolutely. A market segment could be your collection, and customer types could be the unities. Or a project is the collection, and the tasks are the unities. It just depends on the level you're managing at.
Right, right. And this sensing, it can be open, looking at the whole collection, the big picture.
Or it can be focused, zooming in on specific unities, or maybe even looking outside the collection.
Okay. And the processing, what are the options there?
Well, you could focus on the interactions between unities,
Yeah.
how team members communicate maybe, or exposures, like what environment or resources they're dealing with.
Uh-huh.
Or you could focus just on the unities themselves, like certain key employees, or even just specific characteristics, like, say, employee health or skills.
So lots of different things to pay attention to.
Definitely. And then your actions or inactions relate to that focus. Things like organizing.
Like adding or removing people or changing roles.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or designing, maybe adding a whole new team or getting rid of one. Alteration is about changing characteristics.
Training, new software, that kind of thing.
Spot on. Improvement is actively making those characteristics better, and maintenance is, well, keeping things running smoothly or fixing them if they slip.
Okay, and here's something that really stood out to me. The chapter says even seemingly small actions, like moving one person off a project, can totally change the whole environment. The dynamics, how people interact, it's all connected.
That's such a critical point. It's a system, isn't it? You nudge one part and the whole thing can shift. You can't really manage in isolation.
Makes sense. And they have this table 14.1, looks a bit daunting at first.
It does lay out a lot. It combines the sensing type, like, is it internal, focused, external?
Right. Native, focused, external.
To the sensing mode, broad or narrow, open or focused. Then it adds the processing focus.
Interactions, whole unities, or just traits. Relative, exclusive, restricted.
And finally maps those to the action options we just talked about, organization, design, and so on.
So it's a typology of normative management types. But the point isn't to, memorize every box, is it?
No, definitely not. Think of it more as a framework. A tool to help you analyze what's actually happening or to plan more consciously. It helps you see the characteristics of management actions.
Okay, so it's about being more aware, more intentional.
Precisely, which leads into this idea of consistent management.
Right. What does that mean exactly?
It's pretty straightforward, actually. It just means your sensing, your processing, and your actions are all operating at roughly the same level of detail or abstraction.
So you're not using, say, vague company-wide feelings to make a decision about one specific team member's performance.
Exactly. Or the reverse of it. You don't judge the whole company based on one interaction you saw.
Yeah.
The source is clear. That's not really sound management. You need consistency. Apples to apples.
They use that fever analogy, which I thought was quite good.
Yeah, it illustrates it well. So you feel sick, you have a fever, that's sensing your whole body, right? Native, open sensing.
General symptom.
So a consistent initial action might be taking paracetamol. You're treating the whole system, the whole body, based on that whole body signal.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily know why you have a fever yet.
Okay, so the sensing level matches the action level.
Correct. And in an organization, that might look like noticing generally poor communication across the board. That's your open sensing. And then maybe implementing a new company-wide communication platform. That's an action aimed at the whole collection, hoping for a general improvement.
Even if you don't know exactly which teams are struggling most.
Right. Now, contrast that with what they call retrospective synthetic actions. That sounds fancy.
Yeah.
But it's just like the doctor investigating the cause of the fever. They go from the general symptom to more focused sensing tests, examination.
Digging deeper.
Yeah. They process that specific data, maybe diagnose, I don't know, a kidney infection. Then the action antibiotics targeting that infection is also focused. It's still consistent, but it's moved from broad to specific based on investigation.
So in the business context, maybe you see sales dipping overall, then you investigate and find one product line is the issue, so you focus your action on fixing or promoting that specific product.
Perfect example. Still consistent management.
Okay, so what about when things aren't consistent? Misaligned management.
Right. And it's important to note this isn't just about, managers and employees disagreeing or personality clashes.
No, it's about the process itself being mismatched.
Exactly. The sensing, processing, and acting are happening at different levels. But interestingly, the source says a little bit of misalignment isn't always bad. Sometimes it's necessary, even effective, for pragmatic reasons.
Okay. So the emergency department example they used seemed relevant here.
Yeah, that's a great illustration. Think about an ER. It's chaotic. You can't possibly do a full, deep analysis of every single person walking in before doing anything.
Right, things would grind to a halt.
So they use a mix. They track broad metrics, like how many people are waiting, overall acuity, maybe that's open sensing. But they also do highly specific, focused monitoring of critical patients. And their actions reflect that mix. They might call in more staff based on the overall waiting numbers, but they're also doing immediate targeted interventions on that critical patient. That blend of broad and specific, that misalignment, is actually what allows them to function.
So some pragmatic misalignment helps them cope. Like maybe for us, tracking overall project progress, but also having quick check-ins on a task that seems stuck.
Exactly. It's often a necessary balancing act. But the source does warn against extreme misalignment.
Like what?
Well, like making a massive company-wide change based on one anecdote you heard in the hallway.
Right, or trying to assess an individual employee's contribution only by looking at the company's overall profit margin.
Yeah, those are the kinds of extreme mismatches that are generally unsound and, frankly, unfair.
Okay. Then they talk about opportunistic and presumptive management. These sound like they sit somewhere in between consistent and totally misaligned.
That's a good way to think about it. They're not perfectly consistent. Opportunistic is when you sense something at the collection level, the big picture.
Like the whole project is delayed.
Right. And then you immediately jump to acting on a specific unity, say. You discipline the leader of one team involved in that project.
The construction example.
Right.
Blaming the concrete team leader for the whole delay.
Exactly. You're focusing on that unity based on collection-level sensing, hoping that specific action will somehow fix the overall collection objective. It's opportunistic because you're grabbing onto one part without necessarily confirming it's the root cause.
So it's a potential shortcut, but maybe a risky one if your assumption is wrong.
Precisely. And presumptive management is basically the flip side.
How so?
That's when you sense something about a specific unity, or maybe a few unities.
Like one particular machine is performing badly.
Yeah, or one plant in a network. And based only on that limited focus sensing, you make a big change at collection level.
Like replacing all similar machines or plants across the company based on that one failure.
Exactly. You're presuming that the specific issue you observed applies broadly to the whole collection without necessarily having the wider data to back it up.
So both involve a leap of faith, linking different levels without full consistency.
Right. Neither is perfectly aligned. They can sometimes work, but they carry inherent risks of being based on incomplete pictures or assumptions. Got it. Now, the last section really hit home for me, paradoxical expectations. This feels very real world.
Oh, definitely. These paradoxes pop up all the time in organizations and really any human group with roles.
The first one was about resource constraints, right? Companies often can't or don't investigate every little hiccup.
Yeah, it's just not feasible. You'd spend all your time investigating tiny things. So managers often rely on broader metrics, maybe only intervening when something crosses a certain threshold. They often use more synthetic, big-picture thinking.
which makes sense from a resource perspective.
Hmm.
But then the paradox is,
The paradox is that those same organizations often expect frontline workers to sense, analyze in detail, and act immediately on every single deviation they encounter in their specific task.
oh, so there's a mismatch in expectation. Managers get to be synthetic, workers have to be highly analytical about every detail.
Often, yes, the source uses that example of a manager maybe making a big decision based on intuition.
But then criticizing a staff member for trying something intuitive with a client that didn't quite work out, it's that kind of double standard.
Yeah, I can see that happening.
Yeah.
What about the paradoxes around change?
Several key ones. One is the urgency paradox. Big, important, necessary changes, the ones that might take real effort and resources.
Like overhauling an outdated IT system.
Exactly. Those can somehow get labeled not urgent and get kicked down the road again and again, even though everyone kind of knows they need to happen eventually. The sheer size and resource need makes them easy to postpone.
The too big to start now problem.
Pretty much. Then there's the paradox around implementing change. Management might expect employees to just, adopt the new thing quickly.
Just do it.
Right, without fully appreciating the actual resources, time, mental energy, focus that individuals need to actually reconfigure how they work, how they think. It takes effort to change habits and processes.
And they mention that scarcity mentality.
Yeah, the idea that when people feel stretched thin, they naturally gravitate towards smaller, quicker tasks they can complete just to feel productive, which can unintentionally slow down the adoption of bigger, more important changes.
That makes a lot of sense. And the irony. Managers complaining about employee slowness while maybe delaying changes they were supposed to implement.
It's a classic dynamic, isn't it? Happens all the time.
And the final paradox. About action itself.
This one's subtle but powerful.
Mm-hmm.
It says that even if you have good sensing, accurate information, and there's no immediate crisis, so technically you should be able to plan and act proactively.
Yeah.
Success still isn't guaranteed because you might lack the ability to actually mobilize the energy needed.
Energy, like physical resources or something else.
It can be material resources, sure, but also cognitive energy, emotional energy, motivation. Think about past failures making people hesitant, current stress draining capacity, or just a lack of collective will or buy-in.
So even with a perfect plan on paper, if the energy or motivation isn't there in the system, things can stall or go sideways.
Exactly. It leads to delays, maybe forcing you back into reactive, retrospective actions, even when you try to be proactive. It's a reminder that management involves mobilizing more than just information and logic.
Wow, that adds another layer. So this leads to their idea of management potential.
Right. They frame it as basically a combination of two things. The appropriateness of your chosen normative management type, how well your sensing, processing, action align for the situation, and your ability to actually mobilize that available energy within the collection you're managing. Get both right, and your potential is high. Falter on either, and it drops.
So it's about both the what and the how, plus the oomph to make it happen.
You could put it that way, yeah. The structure and the energy.
Okay. So understanding all these types, consistent, misaligned, opportunistic, presumptive, and these paradoxes, it really gives you a different way to look at things, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It provides a richer vocabulary and framework for analyzing why things work or don't work in your own experience in your organization. It helps make sense of the complexities.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, let's quickly circle back on the main points. We looked at consistent management, getting sensing, processing, action aligned.
Yes, striving for that coherence.
But also opportunistic and presumptive styles where there's some misalignment, sometimes pragmatic, sometimes risky.
Right. And the idea that some misalignment can even be useful, like in that ER example.
So for everyone listening, maybe take a second to think about your own default approach. Is it generally consistent? Does it fit your context?
Yeah, and how could you maybe foster more consistency? Think about consciously linking how you sense, what you focus on, and what you do.
And if you tend towards being opportunistic, maybe double check you're validating those opportunities with good sensing before jumping in.
Good point. And if you lean presumptive, actively challenge those assumptions. Seek wider information, diverse views, before applying specific learnings broadly.
Looking back at past decisions could be useful too, right? See where maybe things were misaligned and learn from that for next time.
Definitely. Learning from those past misalignments is key. And remembering to adapt different situations might call for different balances of consistency and misalignment.
Okay, so final thought then. Given all these nuances, these paradoxes, and especially this critical role of mobilizing energy, how can really understanding these management types help us become, I don't know, more empathetic leaders, more effective collaborators in whatever collection we're part of?
That's a great question to ponder. Maybe digging deeper into that energy mobilization aspect, what drains it, what builds it in a team or organization, could be really insightful for improving how we actually manage and lead.
Food for thought. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
My pleasure.
Until our next exploration.